Good evening. This is Union Buzz, and tonight we have a special program. Normally we are on from normally we are on the first and third Fridays, and tonight is the fourth Friday of the month. So this is a very special program, and it's a very important program. Tonight we have a number of guests, uh, starting with Yolanda Williams, Sergeant on the San Francisco Police Department, Mr. Eric Broyles, he is an attorney, and Miss Cheryl Dorsey, she is a retired sergeant of the LA or Los Angeles Police Department. This show tonight, we'll be discussing uh, the police department and how Black Lives Matter. Tonight, our host will be Tammy Bryant, who is right next to me, and Yolanda Williams will also be a co-host because we need her expertise in talking about this Black Lives Matter. And Attorney Balls will tell us about the law, and Shill's going to tell us what's happening in LA and how Black Lives Matter in LA and how this movement and what's happening with I would say the murders that go on with the police departments and Black Lives. So with that, I normally do a little shout out, but this program is too important and too special, and I'm just going to give the telephone number, which is 415-861-6648. I'd like for people to call in and ask questions of the guest. That would be Yolanda, Eric, and Cheryl. You can call in and ask questions of them. And then we're going to discuss Cheryl's and Eric's book. But not right now. Go ahead, Tammy.
Well, I was just going to reiterate that we are live. It's Friday, September 25th. We'd like you to call in. We'll be on the air for about the next hour. And we're very excited to have these special guests with us. But I do want to give one shout out because today is the National Day of Remembrance for Victims of Violent Crime. So I want to give a shout out to Maddie Scott and for all the hard work she does around safety of our youth in the community. So with that, I'll let you take over.
Okay. All right. Well, we can start. We should start with Yolanda. Yolanda's been on the program twice before today, and her presence was felt throughout the city of San Francisco in questions that we asked her about Black lives and how police got to the point where they were people were being shot. So especially black men. So we asked Yolanda to come on the program, and she did. And the questions she asked, we asked her. She was able to answer. And Yolanda, tonight, I would like for you to first pose a question that we should be asking about Black lives and how Black lives matter in this incident and what we're doing tonight, what we're talking about tonight.
Well, I want to look at it a little bit further than that from the standpoint of the question that is commonly posed. It's been posed in San Francisco, and it's also been posed on a national level. The president even spoke about it in his report on policing. And that is racism systemic within law enforcement agencies across the nation? Or are we just fortunate here in San Francisco to have the only law enforcement agency in the nation that is exempt from systemic racism? And I would pose that to Cheryl, and then, of course, I'd like to hear Eric's opinion on that question.
Well, what I believe is that certainly racism is systemic on police departments, and it's cultural. And by that, I also want to add that it's from the top down. And when I say top down, I'm talking about from that police chief, commissioner, sheriff, down to the officers who work patrol. Because many times police chiefs have grown up, if not on that department where they serve, they certainly come from another police department, and so they were all police officers at one time, right? And they were all involved in the shenanigans that we see now. And so when they say to us, this thing that we see going on, which has reached pandemic levels, is somehow new, few and far in between, we know that they're being intellectually dishonest, right? And so this is nothing new what we're seeing. We're seeing it more because of the advent of the cell phone. We're seeing finally corroboration for what victims in the Black and brown community have been complaining about for years. And we're also seeing these same police chiefs circle the wagon, minimize and mitigate that bad behavior. They allow the officers what I call the gift of resignation rather than firing them when they are caught doing bad deeds. And then they move on to another police department, much like professional ball players do on teams. They move around and they move around, and there's no accountability. That's the thing that families are looking for, is accountability.
Okay. Go
So,
ahead.
police departments don't operate in a vacuum. They're part of our society. So, is racism alive in our society? Yes. And so, the manifestation of the racism differs depending on the form that you're operating in. If you're encountering a police officer, the manifestation could be death of someone who's of a different race. If you're in a courtroom, it could be a lower jury verdict. If you're in a corporation, it could be lack of promotion. So the manifestation of the racism is what we're really dealing with. You can't just isolate police departments and say, are they systemically racist? Do we have a racist problem in our country? Do we have a problem with, and I think it's a bigger issue now of more unconscious bias, because I just don't think a lot of people walk around hating people in that way consciously. I don't think that's the vast majority of Americans, but given how society has portrayed African Americans in the media, we can't help but to have some hatred for us. We even have it towards ourselves by what we've experienced in this country and how we are portrayed. And so that is a unconscious sort of thing. It's reflexive.
So my understanding of that is that we're saying that police officers with this unconscious bias are unconsciously shooting black men, or will we say that unconscious bias comes in when they're policing,
So
and it's general?
if you take the case of LeVar Jones in South Carolina, that to me is a clear case of unconscious bias, right? The officer asked LeVar Jones, hey, reach into your car and get me your driver's license. When he moved, and he moved just a little too fast, he got shot. That was a reflex. Now, is that officer racist? I don't know. I don't know the man. He could be. And so certainly you see manifestations of overt racism in policing. That's not my point. My point is that this notion of unconscious bias affects all of us in how we perceive African Americans and the value of African Americans.
Okay. So I would like to say this. In the readings, Yolanda, I can't remember the name of that book, Blink.
Blink, yes.
In the book Blink, I don't know if you've read that book,
I have.
but that sense of consciousness also happens when police get to a certain point. And in the book Blink, this person who was shot in New York City, the police had that sense of, I don't know, shoot first and ask questions later. I don't understand it, and your explanation of it was good, but I also heard Cheryl say something about on our ride over. Cheryl mentioned something about how some black people or black men are criminals. They're just criminals, period. And so how do you know, as a police officer, not what the conscience is of that black person who is, say, in this predicament where the police are there with him?
Let me
I was
Sure,
just
go ahead.
sorry, I was going to do some housekeeping and say it is live tonight. Phone number to call in is 415-861-6648. So please call in. It's live on September 25th, 415-861-6648. Sorry, I just wanted to let our viewers know.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
So let me say this about bias, conscious, unconscious. Certainly racism is an issue, right?
Yes.
However, I'm comfortable with taking race completely off the table because for me, what it is it's a police officer who is drunk with power. It's a police officer who has been allowed to do bad things and hide under the shelter and umbrella of a police entity. And so if there is no choice for that consequence, which winds up in great bodily harm or deadly force, then how do we deter that bad behavior? When you have police chiefs who won't even admit that maybe there's a problem on their department, when we see things like Eric Garner, when we see a prohibited chokehold used and then have Commissioner Bratton say to us that it wasn't, when we see here in Los Angeles, California, in the case of Ezell Ford, officers who had no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion to stop him, yet they did, engaged him and elevated the incident to a deadly force incident. And then you have the police chief, Charlie Beck, in Los Angeles saying that that was good police work. How do you deter that bad behavior? And so officers quickly learn that they are sheltered and covered. And so they do this thing over and over. And I am a true believer, and they've not let me down yet, that when we see something on a national level that is most outrageous and egregious, this is not the first time. And we know this to be true in the case of Tamir Rice, because we know that Tim Lohman had come from another police department who did not fire him, but allowed him to have that gift of resignation. He was then hired by Cleveland, went on to kill Tamir. We know that Eric Casebolt in McKinney, Texas, before he grabbed that 14-year-old bikini-clad teen and flung her around like a rag doll, had been a Texas state trooper and an Oklahoma City police officer, right? And we know that Darren Wilson, before he killed Mike Brown, had been on Jennings Police Department, which was disbanded because it was so morally corrupt, right? And so officers move around like chess pieces. There's no accountability. There's no deterrence of bad behavior. Take race out of it. Officers who are drunk with power.
Officers who are drunk with power. Yolanda,
Yes.
you haven't said anything yet.
Well, I was listening attentively to what Cheryl was saying, and it brought to mind the Texgate incident. It's a clear-cut case here in San Francisco Police Department of the problem that you speak of, my sister. The fact that this occurred last year in 2014. However, it was not brought to light until March of 2015. And yet we are still waiting for a decision. Somehow the superior courts have gotten involved, and we're waiting for a decision as to whether or not these officers can be disciplined by the agency that hired them. I find this to be most outrageous and egregious thing that could happen in this day and age. And then to live in a city and county with a mayor who dared to say just 2 days ago, and then I heard it multiple times because I had to continuously watch it to make sure that I heard him correctly. But he stated on Channel 5 that in the San Francisco Police Department, he is of the opinion that racism is not systemic. It's not systemic as long as it is not affecting you or your culture. However, when you are the one on the receiving end, then you understand how black and brown people feel. And the only reason that the Asian population has not been experiencing racism at the rampant pace that the black and brown people have been experiencing it is because of the fact that it's all about what ethnicity and what background the mayor is that's empowered in the city and county of San Francisco. Because I know you remember when Willie Brown, our black mayor, was mayor of San Francisco, oh, we had it going on. But now we are back in the 50s and 60s here in San Francisco.
Thank you. Now, there was a telephone call. I mean, not telephone call. There was a radio program that Yolanda alerted me to. And Yolanda, I would like for you to say something about that radio program so that
It was a radio ad.
radio
And
ad.
I just want to say, I heard it. I was in my car, in your car actually, and I heard it, and it was outrageous and infuriating, and
Right.
I was really glad that you responded. So
Yes.
So Yolanda, would you tell us about that radio program
Well,
quickly,
it was
and then
a
we'll let the panel discuss it.
it was a public service announcement, and it was the bargaining agent, the San Francisco Police Officers Association, retired president, that decided that it was time to address racial profiling. And basically, he was telling, and literally telling, the public that racism is not systemic in the San Francisco Police Department, and those who feel that way and say these horrible things about the San Francisco Police Department are just villainizing the agency, and that they speak for the minority community.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because police unions across the nation, that's what they do, right? They support and coddle bad behavior. And so they try to convince us that the things that we see are somehow not really the things that we see. And so I'm not surprised, and I don't expect them to do anything different because that's what their role is. But again, like I say, unless and until you have police chiefs and commissioners who will admit that there's something to fix, that there's a problem, then there's nothing to fix. And it seems as if those in the positions of power seem to have a symbiotic relationship. When you have a police chief who's appointed by a mayor, he serves at the pleasure of the mayor. And when you have, if you have the luxury of having an independent police commission like we do in Los Angeles, who's appointed by the mayor, they serve at the pleasure of the mayor. And so neither will do anything that is not pleasing to his master, if you will. And so it's not surprising when you have them all in agreement about a thing that we know is occurring that should not. And the problem for Yolanda, this whole text gate situation is that police chiefs, commissioners, and sheriffs have tremendous power. They are the king, if you will. And independent commissions make recommendations, and I think that's something that should change. I think that they should be able to make a recommendation that has teeth to it. Because in Los Angeles, California, our independent police commission recently came back in the Ezell Ford shooting and said that the officers shot him, killed him out of policy, that they created a situation that caused this young man's death. And our police chief basically said, thank you, I appreciate your report, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And he even took it a step further. He went up on the roof of the police administration building and made a private selfie video, which he published, or someone published for him, saying to the officers on the Los Angeles Police Department that I support you and that the mayor, Eric Garcetti, supports you. So to me, that's code talk for understand the officers that shot and killed Ezell Ford will receive minimal discipline, if any, because it can be something, discipline can be training, right? It doesn't have to be firing. It doesn't have to be days off without pay. It could be a slap on the hand. And so I have no confidence that my police chief in Los Angeles is going to do the right thing by the Ford family.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to audience to know that, let me get it in. Oh, I
you
gotta
have
get
to
them
flip
on
cameras.
Got it in the right camera. This is Cheryl's book. It's called The Creation of a Manifesto, Black and Blue, or Black and Blue, The Creation of a Manifesto. And in this book, Cheryl goes into some of the names that you've heard tonight. So I'd like for Cheryl to also hold up her book. So I'm going to give it back to you. Hold it up, Cheryl.
So,
they can see who
I
the writer is. I
chronicle,
wanna know who the writer is.
chronicle my 20-year journey on the Los Angeles Police Department from 1980 to 2000, right? I came on in 1980 when the department was under a consent decree to hire more women and minorities. I wrote this book on the heels of Christopher Dorner because I wanted people, although I don't know Christopher Dorner and I certainly don't condone what he did, but I wanted people to understand how superpowers like the Los Angeles Police Department can grind you down and wear you down and get you to a place where you would do something that is unconscionable. And this is not unique to law enforcement. This could happen if you work in a hospital. It could happen if you work for a large corporation. And so I wanted people to understand how he got there. I wanted people to understand that you have options after that superpower. There's life after, right?
Yes.
And I also was hopeful that maybe Christopher Dorner's mother might pick up my book and read a little bit about what goes on internally on police departments. Again, not unique to LAPD. What I talk about happens all across the nation. When you talk to people who look like me, who work patrol, who work detectives, the stories are similar, right? And
Yes,
so I
they
wanted
are.
Mrs. Dorner to know that her son was not crazy. She understands that, but I wanted her to hear it from somebody who looks like me and talks about the kinds of things that I went through in a way where the department cannot discredit me. I'm not crazy. I didn't kill anybody. I'm honorably retired, and I spent 20 years all in patrol.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Now, Eric, I'd like to ask you a question. If this sort of way of policing is endemic, how does the society, or say a community like San Francisco, alter the conditions through a legal and proper manner?
Sure. So there is no one solution to it. So it has to be a comprehensive approach. And I think some of the task force that have been created to address some of the problems you see in policing, those are good first steps. I think the protests that you see are good first steps. But one of the things that I talk about in my book, Encounters with Police, A Black Man's Guide to Survival, is to comply now, contest later. And basically, the theme of the book is that if we start, number one, filing written complaints. Now, in some cities, complaints don't mean anything, right? If you file a complaint, maybe in Chicago, it may not mean that much because of the union's presence. But what it does is it builds a paper trail. Can you imagine if in Baltimore, if everybody knew about rough rides in the Baltimore area,
Right.
what if there were 1,000 written complaints? Freddie Gray's family wouldn't have gotten $6 million, they would have gotten 10, right? And that cost is going to bring about, until there's some pain extracted from the system, there won't be change. And so complaints are number one. Number two is civil rights lawsuits, all right? The complaints help to build a framework for these civil rights lawsuits to occur. So after the civil rights lawsuits, you have the political process, which is one of the most important, because I agree with my fellow panelists have said, is that it starts at the top, and it's a policy issue, right? It's policy, it's culture, and we have a right. Our power resides in exercising our right to vote. But not only can we exercise our right to vote and change who the mayor or who the county executive is, registered voters serve on juries, right, and award damages, right? So it's a two-prong. You have an ability to participate in a couple of different ways. And so those are the suggestions I would have. File written complaints. There's a very hungry civil rights legal community out there now that's ready to file these lawsuits. So use the legal process, and then engage in the electoral process. Register to vote and vote.
Thank you.
Can I just add one more thing to that?
Yes, go ahead.
In terms of the political aspect, certainly I think people should be reaching out to legislators. I belong to a group of officers, the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, Reform, and Accountability. We went in February and met with Representative Sheila Jackson Lee because she's a member of the Judiciary Committee. And there are others who are also on that committee. I just came back from the Congressional Black Caucus. Representative Emmanuel Cleaver, Representative Tim Scott are all people who are actively engaged in this whole Black Lives Matter movement. And so I encourage people to reach out to the legislators, because it's going to take legislation. It's going to take repealing the Police Officers' Bill of Rights, that thing that they hide under when they do bad things, that thing that prevents them from being fired and gives them that gift of resignation, that thing that allows that police department to pay that 4.2 or 1.6 million, right? It almost feels as if police departments have a built-in slush fund that they're ready and willing to give to a family, and throwing money at a family who has lost a loved one is not justice.
True, very true. Now, right now, let me show Eric's book, because Eric put it up there. So we're going to show his book now. This is Eric's book, the the young gentleman over there, the lawyer. This is his book, Encounters with Police, a black man's guide to survival. That's it. Okay. Now,
I just want to say it's very sad that we need a book like this, and that it's very telling about what's going wrong with our society, and when it is such a noble profession that you've gone into to protect and serve, and that you can't even feel safe amongst your colleagues at times. It's very sad.
Well, what's even sadder, Tammy, is the fact that the people who are totally responsible for the mistrust and corruption within police agencies are less than 1% of those law enforcement officers that are out there across the nation. And the other sad thing is that today, in 2015, we have to be talking about mandating officers to wear body-worn cameras, because we've gotten to the point where there are so many officers being found guilty of either tampering with evidence, lying under oath, or police reports that are basically doctored up. And in fact, Cheryl, I just want to let you know that I am on the committee for San Francisco Police Department, where we were developing the body watch camera policy. And so the city and county of San Francisco is going to have each officer wearing body-worn cameras. Hopefully, by the end of this year or by the beginning of next year, we will at least have another set of eyes and ears that will be portraying the story. And in this regard, I think it will also make the public feel a little bit more comfortable about their encounters with law enforcement officers.
Well, see, I have a different take on that, because for me, body cameras don't bring me any comfort, right? Mm-hmm. Because we've seen so many instances of things that have been recorded, right? We see Sam DuBose recently, who was recorded on a traffic stop, and we hear that officer say that he was drugged down the street just before he shot and killed him, and we know that factually that didn't occur, right? And so, for me, what needs to happen is people in the community, much like Eric said, who are part of that jury pool, need to understand that police officers, we're just regular folks. We're not superheroes. I don't have a cape when I put on that uniform. And so every now and again, and I believe, like Yolanda said, that those who are misbehaving are the minority. Mm-hmm. So let me be clear about that, mm-hmm. right? They're the minority. But what jurors need to understand is that police officers don't always get it right. And for too long, great deference is given to a police officer because people respect the authority, they respect the uniform, and they think that if an officer says a thing, it must be so. Even though we see officers like Michael Schlager, who takes dead aim and pumps 8 rounds into the back of a man who he can't catch, right? Yeah. After he stops him because the third tail light on his car is not working, right? And we know that that was not the first time that he did that. When we see things like Robert Bateman in, I think, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the pay-for-play deputy sheriff who thought he was reaching for a taser and grabbed his gun and then says, oops, so, we're starting to see some officers be charged, but we need convictions. We need some teeth behind this thing. And so people, jurors, prospective jurors, you need to do your part. You need to not hide that jury summons when it comes, okay? And understand that I don't have a cape. I'm just a regular person. And we would hope that officers' training would kick in when they get in that situation that's very stressful, right? Yeah. And that they will do that thing that they've been taught and not get frustrated because I can't catch you because I'm not in the kind of shape I should be in, so I'm going to just shoot you, right? We should not expect that every time an officer says he was in fear for his safety, that he was really in fear for his safety. We should hold that officer accountable to attest to the use of force, attest to every round that was fired. If you fired 6 rounds like Darren Wilson did, after the first 2, why are you still in fear of a wounded teenager who's already suffered probably a mortal injury, right? Explain that to me. So jurors have to understand that I don't think officers really deserve the deference that they've been given.
I I agree with you, and one of the things that sort of mystifies me about this whole situation of Black Lives Matter, and you're on Union Buzz, and we're at 415-861-6648. You can call in and ask the panel any question as long as it has to do with police or legal matters. You can call in and ask any question you like. One of the things that gets me is that this is for Yolanda and Cheryl, and maybe even you too, Eric. Is how come when a policeman accosts someone and someone's killed that they don't keep records and those records aren't published? In other words, I'm understanding through the papers and through information on the television and radio that some of the records of how many rounds was fired, who they killed, is not being recorded. Or it's being recorded now because Black Lives Matter movement is forcing the issue for them to be reported. But prior to that, and I'm talking about the early 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, these matters weren't being reported. In other words, they weren't writing it out and doing a police report. How can a policeman fire his weapon, use rounds, and it not be recorded and reported?
Well, actually, it is reported, but you have to understand there's the Police Officer Bill of Rights that also kicks in a matter like that. But the reports are actually written in the event of an officer-involved shooting, and there are investigations that occur behind the scene. But because usually it's a pending investigation, a lot of the information cannot be immediately disseminated to the public, because then all of a sudden that might taint the case.
I see.
And I'll let Cheryl take it
and then
from there.
the other thing is that certainly police departments know what's going on within their department, right? They know what's going on within their agency. And so now I think on a national level, I think the federal government is getting involved. And so they're going to start capturing that data and trying to see if there's a trend. Well, we don't need that to tell us that there's a trend. We don't need that to tell us that there's a problem, right? That's our lived experience. However, in Los Angeles, we too are in the process of getting those body cameras, and I don't know if this is going to be the kind of thing that's gone from department to department, but our department will get the body cameras, but they won't be made public. And so the images that are on the video, we just have to trust the police chief. He's going to look at it, and he's going to tell us if it was an out-of-policy use of force, if it was an out-of-policy deadly shooting. And so that's why, for me, I don't get a whole lot of comfort behind this whole body camera thing.
I think the issue that you're really getting at on the reporting is not the fact that police officers don't write a report. They have to write a report of what happened. I think the problem with reporting that you may be referring to is the fact that the United States Department of Justice is not receiving uniform reports from police departments across the country about what's happening in their jurisdiction. So, for example, about 120 African-American men are killed each year by police officers. Now, some of them it may be in the context of a bank robbery or armed event, but if you look at South Carolina, right, the report said that he reached for his taser, he fought him. So we don't know how many of those 120 are actually, Walter Scott situations, right?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Go ahead.
But the other problem is, of that 120, that's not every department. Only certain departments are actually funneling those numbers up to the U.S. Department of Justice. And each department gets to determine how it classifies an action, whether it was a felony or whether they get to determine how they describe the incident that they report to the Department of Justice. So there needs to be a uniform reporting standard by all departments.
So wait a minute. The way I understood what you're saying is that these reports could be put in other places and not be reported, or not the Justice Department shuffle them off someplace else, and we don't have an actual count of what these 120 black men has been shot.
You definitely do not have an accurate count. You definitely do not. That is a fact. But the bigger issue is that we don't have an accurate count on how many departments are actually funneling information up to the federal government.
We don't.
No,
Okay.
we have no idea.
Tammy?
So I just want to remind our viewers that this is Union Buzz. It's a live special on Friday, September 25th. We're going to go off the air shortly, so you only have a few more minutes to get your calls in. We're at 415-861-6648. Again, 415-861-6648. We thought we heard the phone, but we didn't.
No.
But please do call. We have very, very special guests with us today. We have Cheryl Dorsey, who's a retired LAPD police sergeant and an author, and we have attorney Eric Broyles, and we have from the San Francisco Police Department Sergeant Yolanda Williams, who's the president of the San Francisco Police Officers for Justice. Is that
Officers for Justice.
Officers for Justice?
That's correct.
Right.
And so we're very honored to have you guys here and to talk about this really important subject. And it is, I think for me, I just want to say, we're union strong, right? We want to believe in unions, but it's actually really frustrating when unions actually defend the bad members. And again, we're talking about 1 or 2% that are bad, and they won't even own up that there are some bad officers that shouldn't be police officers, that actually taint the good officers. And that's what really upsets me, is how hard you guys work, the sacrifice you make, the time you give up with your families and the risk you take, and yet, you're not, they're still protecting officers who don't deserve that kind of protection. And I really want to just point out that that's the one time I think the unions are just so wrong on how they handle this. And he's holding up both books, so, and the phone's ringing, Carl.
The phone's
We
ringing?
have a call,
How you know?
because I saw the light go off.
I see it. Oh, there it is.
So this is a little bit low tech
Hello?
over here.
Yes. Hello?
Hello, how are you today?
Yes. Go ahead with your question to the panel.
Yes, my question is,
You have to turn your TV down.
Please turn your TV down, or we won't be able to hear your question. And
I'm concerned because I'd like to hear from the panel about the cameras. I understand there's a move now that the officers get a chance to view the officers get a chance to view the film before they make their report, and I think that's questionable.
sorry,
I'd like to hear from you.
they heard it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what
Okay, thank you very much, caller. We'll answer your question. Go
his
ahead.
concern was that officers will get to view the video prior to writing their report. And so, I don't know. I'm sure every police department is going to have a policy that may vary and differ, and they may not look the same, right? And that's part of the problem, is that there's no uniformity in terms of how these images are going to be captured and how they're going to be dealt with. And so that's why, I continue to say that cameras don't bring me any comfort. And understand, at the end of the day, whatever is captured on that camera, the police chief gets to decide whether or not, in his opinion, this was excessive, whether or not, in his opinion, this was necessary, whether or not, in his opinion, the officers had reasonable suspicion or probable cause. So it really matters not what we see, if we get to see it as a public. It only matters how the police chief interprets it.
Okay.
And just for that particular caller, I do want to say that the Officers for Justice and most of the police employee groups that represent the members of the San Francisco Police Department, by majority, agreed that the officers should have the opportunity to see what has been recorded on the police body-worn camera, because it is evidence, and we are responsible for all evidence, and the officers should have an opportunity to be able to address everything that has been recorded and explain their actions. So I don't, and many of the members, I would say the majority of the members of the San Francisco Police Department don't necessarily feel that that is a problem. However, I must also agree with Cheryl from the standpoint that each individual law enforcement agency has their own body watch camera policies and procedures. So they will vary from agency to agency. But I will say the majority of the police department's policies that I have seen from major law enforcement agencies allow the officers to view what is captured prior to completing the report. Because if a chief's going to come out and explain to you about an incident, I want him to tell me factually what evidence has been captured on video and explain it. Right. However, if we preclude or prohibit someone from viewing it initially, then we get a police report that is not as telltale as we would like to have it on the initial write-up. Okay?
I have a question for the panel. I want you guys to tell me how I'm supposed to survive an encounter with the San Francisco Police Department. And
it's all in the book.
Good answer, Eric.
It's all in the book.
It's all in the book.
It's all in the book. No, but I want you guys to talk about it because I think that your perspective will probably be like mine, but they see it from another side.
Well, I wrote the book with a police officer, my best friend. So,
is that right?
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, who's a 26-year patrolman.
Patrolman, okay.
Yeah,
cool. Okay, so we
think,
can hear that too.
Yeah.
All right. But you know what? I agree with you. But it's different when a woman has to encounter a man on a police stop or an encounter. But it's different. I think it's different. Now I want the three of you to tell me, I got two beautiful women here, and I want them to tell me how it is when you run into somebody like me on the police force who's boisterous and forceful and aggressive.
You mean as a police officer?
As a police officer.
So here's the deal. As a female officer, I understand that I'm not going to be able to beat you up, right? And
but
so,
you can shoot me.
Well, listen, but that's not what I do, okay? Because I've been trained to escalate and de-escalate force, right? We have a pyramid, if you will, in terms of how we are to respond. We are only to use that force necessary to overcome the resistance, right? And so that's where training kicks in. And so, that's where common sense kicks in, right? And if sense was common, everybody would have it, right? And that's where empathy and compassion plays a part. And that's not something that you can teach a person, right? If you don't value that person, if you don't look at them and think, that could be my son, that could be my brother, that's somebody's grandmother, then you're going to treat them in a way that is not appropriate. And so for me, as a patrol officer, as a patrol sergeant, and a mother of 4 young men, I always treated people the way I would want anyone to treat my son if you encountered them. And so what I would do is, if I am not able to gain your compliance, because not everybody's happy about the service I'm giving them, right? And so I get that, right? And so I have to come up with some other things. I've got to talk to you. I might have to bat my eyes. I may have to do something to convince you to come along and go along, right? And so I don't get to just crack you in the head with a flashlight because you're not doing what I say. That's not how we're taught. And if police officers just really did what they're taught, if they verbalized, if they escalated and de-escalated force, then things would be a lot better. And then citizens need to understand, much like Eric said, I say you should not hold court curbside. Yeah. If an officer gives you an order, whether you believe it's right, just, or fair, do it. Comply. Because many times, as a responding officer, you don't know what I know. You don't know what dispatchers told me on this radio. You don't know what I'm looking for. And we understand that police officers sometimes say that I'm looking for somebody that look like you, right? And it may not be necessarily so, but that's why you create that paper trail that Eric talked about. That's why you write a letter of complaint, and I say write it to Lottie Dottie and everybody, and you CC everybody so that everybody knows who got a copy, right? Because in the morning, somebody's gonna pick up the phone and say, I got this letter and it has your name on it. Did you see this? Somebody is gonna have to do something about it. And in the event that they don't, you've at least created that trail, and at least in Los Angeles, we have something called a pitches motion, right? So if someone is arrested, a good defense attorney knows to go get that record and see how many times has this guy cracked somebody in the head? How many times has he said he was in fear for his safety? How many times did he see someone reach for the waistband and it wasn't really so? And so you need to comply. You need to be a good witness. You need to be a good advocate for yourself to survive that police encounter?
What I teach people in the book is most of these incidents occur because you have a citizen who is upset that they've been pulled over. Okay, before even the encounter happens, the fact that you got pulled over raises, the blood pressure and the angst amongst the citizens. So what I tell people is, and try to give them a mindset to way to think about these encounters differently. All right, number one, the encounter is not final. A police officer can't convict you of anything, not even a speeding ticket. They can charge you, they can't convict you. Only a judge or a jury can convict you. So that's the first thing. Don't look at it as final. Number two, as Cheryl was saying, there's actually an inverse relationship between your resistance and your power, right? So the more hostile and the greater resistance, the lower your power goes, right? Because now Cheryl can write you up for disorderly conduct. Or if you get a bad officer like the guy in South Carolina and you bump him with the car door, you might get killed, right? And so, and then I say, look, you have a right to be upset and angry if you're treated badly. If it's a professional, then just deal with it in a different form. But if you have a rogue officer, again, which I agree they're in the minority, but if you have a rogue officer, you can't fight them on the spot, right? Because they're the arbiter of your fate in that instance. There's a different form. What I tell young people across the country is that if you ever watch one of those nature shows with an alligator or a crocodile, they don't fight their prey on the ground. They drag them in the water and they roll them. And I say for the rogue cops that are out there are a bunch of civil rights lawyers ready to drag them into the water and roll them. And so I tell them, don't try to fight it on the spot. Your objective when you get pulled over is to get home safely.
Correct. Yolanda?
Well, for me, very similar to what Cheryl said. First of all, I know that there is the pitcher's motion, and that comes into play a lot when you have a good attorney. But when you're out there on the streets, I want to survive just like you want to survive. Believe you me, and the first thing I think about is the fact that if you're a man and I'm a woman, the first thing I want to make sure you know clearly that I am a woman. And we got that understood. The next thing I'm going to try and do is to create some type of atmosphere, develop some type of rapport with you. Now, if you're still in an agitated state and you want to escalate, or I see that you might be having maybe some mental health issue or something like that at that point in time, I may even be courteous enough to call you an ambulance so that we can bring some assistance. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I will also do is while I'm trying to quell the situation, calm you down, be a little bit understanding and empathetic about what it is you're telling me, because I'm going to ask you why you're agitated specifically with me. At the same time, if I do have to call for backup as a sergeant, I'm going to maintain control of that scene. And that's the thing that sometimes as officers we forget to do. When the troops come to back us up, then we're like, oh yeah, let's all get in there and get it done. Mm-hmm. Instead of slowing it down. We just got to slow the pace down. I mean, we can still get the job done. We just need to slow everything down. And you, in order for you to survive and come through this successfully, is always remember that every officer has an independent star number or badge number. You need to make sure you record that. If you don't have a writing apparatus, put it to memory or use your cell phone. Do whatever you need to do in order to ensure later you can document it. The one thing that black and brown people just hate to do is to write things down. I see it amongst police officers on a day-to-day basis. So that's the other thing you need to do. Be prepared to document things.
All righty. We're down to about to the end of the show. This has been Union Buzz. And I'd like to stand up and, before we go any further, let you know this is new T-shirts. And you can get one of these T-shirts by calling into the show or going to the website, that's unionbuzz.com, and check it out. We have the shirts. So, but this is more important than the shirts.
So we only have 2.5 minutes left.
We have 2.5 minutes left. I'd like to also I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you. And Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey from the Los Angeles Police Department flew here today just for this show, and I want the audience to know that. She flew here today to address this audience because it needs to be addressed. And you know why? That's because Yolanda Williams, who is also a sergeant, told us that she needs to be here. So I'd like to thank both of you from the bottom of my heart, and also that you guys brought Eric, and who can tell us the legal side. So this for me. This has been enlightening. So the next time I get ready to punch a policeman, I won't do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Please don't.
Can I just say one thing in parting? I'd like
Please.
to thank
Yeah,
you.
go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. And for anyone who would like more information, feel free to reach out to me through my website, which is CherylDorsey.net. I'm also
I
on
want you guys
Twitter.
to give you information.
My Twitter handle is SGT, Cheryl Dorsey. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm all over the place. You can just Google me, Cheryl Dorsey LAPD, and you'll find me without any problem. So I
Okay.
appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you can find more information on my book at survivethepolice.com. Again, the website is survivethepolice.com.
And
Yolanda.
And again, I am Sergeant Yolanda Williams. You can reach me at the Officers for Justice. That is officersforjustice.org. And our phone number is 415-822-2225.
And there's an event
Okay.
tomorrow, Carl?
yes, there's an event tomorrow at Marcus Bookstore. Marcus Bookstore in Oakland, California.
What time?
3 to 5. And we'd like to see everybody there come over, and you can also
Get
purchase
your
these
autographed
books.
copy. Get your
Autographed
autographed copy.
of the book. And Cheryl's going to be there.
And
Eric's going to be there. Yolanda, you going to be there?
I don't know what time it is, but I'll
3 to
try
5.
and be there.
Tomorrow, 3 to
I'll
5.
be there.
Marcus
I'll be
Bookstore.
there.
Bookstore in
in
Oakland.
Oakland.
Please come. It's a big event. It's a big event. It's a big event.
Don't miss
Get
it.
the books. See the books. Get the
So
books.
we thank our guests so much for coming
Coming,
on, and
yes.
thank you for all your hard work and speaking out.
Yes.
And we'll have to have a follow-up show on what we can do to change things and what are the solutions, because we couldn't even get to the solutions.
Union Buzz. Phone is out. Thank you. We got it. That's it. Unless.
I don't think we're still recording because she said she'd come tell us if we're not.
Yeah,
Do you want to see what he's doing there in case we are still recording?
Yeah. Open that door.
Yeah.
Are we? Come on in. Are we still recording or what? I don't
Oh.
think we are.
Okay. Yeah, I
I'm
think
gonna
I think
check.
we went off at 5:52.
I think we were off the fact. Thank you.
Very good. Good
How'd you
job.
like the show?
Good job.
Oh, that's some other audience.